everyone, it's Zoe Gridneff-Barfoot from Centum, Canada. Today I'm going to be sitting down with Clinton Wilkins, who's one of Canada's top mortgage brokers and one of Centum's top mortgage brokers. And we're going to be discussing topics such as why he has continued to stay in the industry, what makes him tick, and why he is choosing to continue to partner with Centum Canada. All that and more coming up shortly. So why don't we get into it? I want to thank you for joining me. And before we you're very welcome. And before we get into it, I want to take an opportunity to congratulate you again for your CMA wins. It was Broker of the Year for Atlantic and Canadian Broker of the Year. That's correct?
That's right. Imagine competing on a national level from Atlantic Canada. I know in mortgage finance, we think obviously the world revolves around Toronto and Vancouver, so it's really cool to be able to compete on the national stage. I think also, being kind of a little bit of an underdog, working with Centum, it's one of the smaller super brokers across this country, and be able to compete against who we think sometimes are the biggest players in the industry, I think is very, very special. Yeah. And it really feels great being recognized in a room of 1,000 people who are your peers.
Yes, exactly.
So, I always say, I'm like, this is the last time that I'm going to, be nominated. I think they need to do a new category for me, maybe like best individual marketing campaign or something. I don't know. Maybe I'll create my own category going forward. But I think just even being able to win and being nominated here in Atlantic Canada, it's really amazing.
Yeah, you need to get your own, in Jeopardy, when there's the champion, there needs to be you're going to be the champion of the CMAs. And so then we need to have a battle, a duel of all the champions of the CMAs.
Maybe Chris Turcotte will allow me to give out the award for a Centum next year. Who knows? I think that could be good. I've never seen a mic I didn't like.
Well, I'm sure if you ask him at the right time, he'll say yes. You might have to battle Jeff for that.
Yeah, I think we all may have to do a little bit of an arm wrestle. I don't know. I put my money on myself on that one.
Right. Yeah.
Don't tell them though.
No. Do you play dirty or do you play fair?
I think I like to play fair, but when push comes to shove, everyone likes to win.
Yeah, right. Depending on what the prize is, right?
Yeah.
And so before we kind of dive in too deep, for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and walk us through your career to date?
I'm a mortgage broker here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I've been in the industry for coming up on 17 years, which really is amazing. Some people are like, how have you been doing this for 17 years? I'm like, it's either, good genes or good docs, maybe a combination, I don't know. When I started 17 years ago, I was one of the youngest people in the room, and still today I'm one of the youngest people. I think it's a very challenging industry to break into. As we know, there's a lot of complexities and nuances to mortgage lending, a lot of moving parts, relationships with lenders, business partners, clients. It's an ever-changing kind of industry, and I think that's what makes it really, really, interesting and exciting. When I first started 17 years ago, I believe it was a lot easier for new agents than it is today. If you had a heartbeat, we could get you a mortgage. We were doing things like 100% financing, 95% loan-to-value refinances, and this was all pre-subprime crash in the U.S., which obviously had a big impact on what we do here in Canada. Mortgage brokers have really come a long way in the last 17 years, I have to be honest. It wasn't as popular maybe to be a mortgage broker back then as it is today. I think there was a lot of educating that we did in Atlantic Canada, and I think we're a little bit behind some of the rest of the country. I think mortgage brokers are more maybe advanced back then in other markets than they were here. We were getting a lot of those second look type files, and it wasn't maybe the premium choice to go to a mortgage broker. And we've really broken down a lot of those barriers. I really think that, I helped break some of those down myself. And there was a period in my career that I wanted to leave the industry. There were some tough times, especially with all the policy changes from the federal government. an OSPI, B21,
Yeah.
a B20 and B21. And really what was going on here in the market in Halifax wasn't very exciting there for a while.
Yeah.
And I think I was coming off a lot of success maybe early on. Back in 2011, I felt at the top of my game. I had been in the industry for about 5 years. You know, you're starting to get some of those renewals. And I started getting, really rewarded on the national level. And for Centum Financial Group, I, was awarded #1 for units and volume back in 2011 after only being in the industry for 5 years. And I'm like, okay, I've made it. This is like, the it thing.
I'm here.
I'm here. I've arrived. But then I think I got a little bit complacent. I loved having my fancy cars and cottages and going on vacation for a month at the time. And I was really kind of skimming the cream off the top. And, the lifestyle creep gets you. I was bringing in a lot of money, but guess what? I was probably spending just as much money as I brought in. And it wasn't rewarding. And I really did want to quit, and I wanted to leave the industry. Back about 5 years ago, I wrote a book for consumers called Confessions of a Halifax Mortgage Broker, which I tell my story. And I tell some stories of my clients, obviously with some different names and their scenarios. And that's really when I shifted the narrative compared to like shoving Clinton down people's throats to education and value first before money. And that's when I started getting the calls. I was getting calls from CTV News and Global and City News. And they started asking for my opinion, and my opinion mattered. And I didn't really, you're like, who's this punk who's been in the industry for 10 years or something? Like, why is he an authority on mortgage lending in this market? And I really kind of changed that narrative around education and awareness. And about 5 years ago, I got asked by City News. They were starting some live broadcasting on the weekends here on our local radio station. That's a talk news station, 95.7. And they asked me if I would do a show. And at that time, it was a half-an-hour call-in show on the weekends just to answer questions about mortgage lending and real estate. And it kind of blew up. And it was so super popular, and they've kind of changed their model here a little bit. We now do an hour show, and we're kind of in the process of pseudo-syndicating this across the country. We're now airing the show in Halifax and in our nation's capital in Ottawa, and it's available anywhere where you want to listen to your podcast. It's available online. Mortgage 101.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, can you stream it? But I want to go back to something that you said a little bit earlier regarding the consumer's perception of brokers. So who do you, like, you said that you were receiving these files, they were like second look files, they weren't quality deals, I'm summarizing.
In some cases,
Yeah, so what do you think caused that public perception that brokers aren't the first stop for clients?
You know what, I think 17 years ago, there weren't as many mortgage brokers maybe as there were today, and there certainly were many, many more bank branches. The shift in retail banking certainly has made a difference, and I think the complexity of mortgage lending has become more and more challenging. Mortgage brokers today are really, I think, viewed more as the experts in the industry, where, this is the only thing that we're doing all day, every day. I'm not trying to sell you a bank account or a credit card or these things. And, less and less transactions now are being done in the branch. I heard a stat the other day from Mortgage Professionals Canada that 90% of first-time home buyers use a mortgage broker. So
that's amazing.
Back then, only about 30% of first-time home buyers were using a mortgage broker. So there certainly has been quite a big shift. And a lot of that, I think, is due to awareness. And there's certainly been a culture shift of, around education and online and making it easier. During the pandemic, I can tell you, I was the first one to admit it. We had over 10,000 paper files on hand here in our office in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. And we weren't really doing things online. We don't, allow consumers to do an online application, but we would meet with the clients usually for half an hour to get the initial application. We'd meet with them again to sign the documents. We weren't really set up to do, e-signing. And in many cases, lenders did not want documents e-signed. This has really been kind of a shift of this pandemic era mortgage finance. It's really opened the door for mortgage brokers. And a lot of these branches, like, they need to see the consumer in front of them. And that's really given us that advantage to transact kind of remotely and work from anywhere and really work how the customer wants us to work. Mortgage lending is, and borrowing getting a mortgage and doing that borrowing is the biggest debt of a consumer's life. And buying a home is oftentimes their biggest purchase and the family's biggest asset. So, being that trusted expert and really being able to hold the client's hand and give them that expert advice, I think has been the differentiating factor to mortgage brokers here in Halifax, but also across the country.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, like, you make a really good point that we are in the industry subject matter experts, and especially when you understand what, the roles and the capacity when you're at the branch, what actually you're mandated to do, you can really see why there's been this shift to brokers, because as the consumers become more and more educated due to things like the internet, and as younger people come up and are asking why, we're seeing this leaning into experts versus, I'm just going to go to my branch. That's what I've done. I bank there. They know it. And I think that's a bit of a generational thing.
But the thing is, I think it certainly is a generational thing. And I think the banks and the people who worked in these branches were seen as experts. But now I think they're seen as generalists. And that's the differentiating factor.
Yes, well, it's like the monetization of everything, right? So it's
and we're going
no longer.
We're going to continue seeing it. I think there's going to be less and less retail banking, and I don't want to say that the banks are bad, because most of the transactions we do here are from the Big Five, and even from our business, we are huge supporters of Scotiabank and TD Bank. And obviously a bunch of, monoline lenders as well. But in rural areas in Canada, the bank lenders really do have very much a stronghold, and it's a big piece of our business. So the experience at the branch versus the experience in the broker channel, I think, is very different. And it's not that we can do anything that the branch can't do. It's just the experience level, and we know how to properly maybe present the file, and we know what questions to ask, and it probably doesn't even get submitted to that lender unless it's going to work. I always pride myself when I say I have 100% approval rating, because I don't submit the files that are not going to be approved, and I know where it's going to be approved. Really, after almost 5,000 transactions and over $1 billion of mortgages funded, I always say I've seen everything, but every day I see something new.
Well, I'm glad you touched on the $1 billion. Congratulations. That was achieved this year, correct?
That's right, yeah.
March, right?
And we're certainly still rocking and rolling here. So I said, okay, should we update it to like 1.1 billion or 1.2 billion? We're like, nah, we're just going to wait until we round it to 2 billion. I'm like, this may be a couple years, but who knows?
Well, with the values of houses going up in the Atlantic provinces, I think it's going to be a lot quicker, because, when we look at $1 billion, historically Atlantic provinces have been on that lower side.
100%. Like, our average mortgage amount used to be $200,000, but now our average mortgage amount is coming up on almost $400,000, which is shocking to me. And this is kind of the last area where housing is still affordable. Here in Halifax, our average home price is about $500,000, and we still have some of the most affordable housing from across this country. And I think that's why we're also seeing a lot of positive migration to the area. There's certainly a lot of people from Ontario, for example, that are moving to Atlantic Canada. For $500,000, you're hard-pressed to maybe even buy a one-bedroom condo in many areas of Ontario, where in Halifax, you can pretty much buy like a new construction property, or even like a kind of a standard, typical home for $500,000 that's detached. I think it's challenging in our market for first-time home buyers, because obviously if the average home price is $500,000, you need to have a lot of household income or a lot of skin in the game to kind of get into the property ladder. So I think there's certainly some frustration in our market here from first-time home buyers. but we're still doing transactions every single day.
It's funny that you mentioned that, the frustration from the locals. It's something that I think is felt everywhere, in the sense of the moment, like Toronto gets too expensive, there's that migration out, and then these places that were, affordable at one point become no longer affordable to the locals, and then they get frustrated. I mean, we moved to Guelph 2 years ago, and we heard the same thing. We were at an open house, and the real estate agent was like rubbing her hands, saying, "I can't wait for all these Toronto people to come up and overpay." And it's like, and then you hear the frustration from the people who are trying to buy, and they're like, well, it's the Toronto people who are pushing us out of the market, and it's very, very challenging. And
I don't know if it's overpaying though. That's the thing. The values have gone up really across the country, and now obviously the Bank of Canada has increased the key overnight rate a couple of times.
Yes.
I think there's some softening happening in Ontario and some softening happening in BC. We haven't seen that here because the demand is still higher than what the supply is. And I think the cost of housing is still quite affordable compared to, obviously the incomes. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens. I'm obviously feeling very positive, obviously from being born and raised here in Nova Scotia.
Right.
We're excited to see the population grow. But I think it's going to be maybe a 20-year kind of ramp up before we get more into a balanced market. We need a lot more supply to kind of keep up with demand.
And is that happening? Are you seeing how construction occurring?
Yeah, we're in a little bit of a hangover from about 20 years ago. The municipality here in Halifax had a moratorium on building basically in the late 90s and early 2000s. So, as the population grew, the builders and the municipality couldn't keep up with obviously getting construction going. But from the federal government and the province, they've helped the municipality, I think, see the light a little bit, and they fast-tracked about 20,000 building lots, which is maybe enough to scratch the surface here a little bit. But we're certainly going to see more construction, I think, in the coming years, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah, it's not an easy solution because, again, it's a time thing.
And it's housing in general and all types of housing. We are not just talking about single-family new construction, detached homes. We're talking, apartments, condos, townhomes. We need all areas of housing, including housing for the lower income folks as well. So it's challenge here in our city, but I think many cities across the country are seeing the same type of challenges. I think we are just hit with a little bit more of a supply issue, and that may hold back that population growth a little bit.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, if there's nowhere to move into, you can't make that change.
That's right.
Yeah. So you mentioned your book. I did have an opportunity to read a little bit about it and read a little bit of it rather. And in it, you said that once you finished your degree, you asked your mortgage broker for a job. Yep. Can you help me understand, what was it about brokering that attracted you?
Well, I was using a mortgage broker at the time, and with my partner, then we had bought a bunch of rental properties. And we had bought and sold a few homes and stuff like that. And at one point, we had about 30 rentals. That was in the old days where buying a rental property was very, very easy. And I was using a mortgage broker at the time, and I was finishing my undergrad. And I asked him for a job, and he's like, first off, you're too young. Second off, you don't have any experience. Third off, I don't think it's a good fit. And I'm like, I'm just going to go do this on my own.
You're like, thanks for the vote of confidence.
And guess what? 17 years later, I think he might be kicking himself. I don't know if he's going to watch this, but he's maybe still in the industry, retiring. But it was actually a mortgage center franchise.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. Just like anything, mortgage lending is a snapshot in time. Just like that was a snapshot in time in 2005 and 2006. But I think things worked out for me okay.
Yeah. I think that, it was very calculated move. But was there anything specifically, like, I mean, I understand that you're working with a broker, but like, what was it? I hear people like they love numbers, or you know, it's the that feeling of getting that client who was declined somewhere, getting their mortgage approved. Like, what is it specifically about brokering that keeps you here? Because you said earlier that you were on the precipice of leaving, but you've stayed and you've been in the industry for 17 years. So and it, it's always a changing industry. So there must have been like
Something
an initial draw card.
Yeah, I think for me the big thing was helping people, and I think the dreams of homeownership is really real here. And it was really very tangible for so many people. So I think that was a big piece of it. I really had that entrepreneurial spirit. Even at like the age of 5, I remember my parents one year gave me a cash register for Christmas, because they're like, you know what, this kid is going to do something with his life. And I wanted to open a goat farm, and I had all kinds of like wild ideas. I had a little DJ business like in high school. So I always had that entrepreneurial spirit, and I think that kind of helped. And I think owning those rental properties early on, I bought my first house when I was 19. Imagine.
Yeah, that's a huge achievement. Like, could you imagine somebody doing that now?
I couldn't imagine
by themselves.
And you know what? I had a free ride in university. Obviously, my parents were able to do that. I don't think I would be here now if I didn't have like all those experiences in the past. I was probably able to take some risks. But let me tell you, I've had just as many failures as I've had successes. I've tried everything, and some things have gone really well, and some things have gone, not so good. And there's many times that I feel like I could have given up. Right.
And what's kept you in the game? Because like you mentioned that at one point you were working out of your basement, that you were sleeping until 10, and you were still making 100K. And I know a lot of people who'll be like, I'm down for that. That's a sweet life. So clearly there was something that life wasn't for you.
I'll tell you what it was.
What was
I'll tell you what it was. First off, the 100K wasn't supporting the lifestyle, so that was a problem. What really kept me going, there's so many times that I almost quit, but my phone kept on ringing. And it was a customer on the other end of the line.
Yeah.
That's what kept me going. And, I'm like, I'll just do one more deal. No, I'll just do one more deal.
Yeah.
No, I'll just do one more deal. And, here we are.
You sound like me eating chocolate. I'll just have
one more
piece.
One more. And I think mortgage lending is a little bit like drugs. And I know that's maybe not a good comparison, but, you do one and you just want more.
Yeah, you get the dopamine hit, right, of helping somebody. If that's the way you're driven, like that's when I was an underwriter, that was always my drive.
You're like, I just want to approve one more deal. I'll just, before I sign off, let's just do one more.
And I hope it's been declined elsewhere so I can be like, haha, I did it.
Yeah, and for me, I really operate on a zero inbox policy. We use our own CRM program that we basically built from scratch, and we live and die by the sword here. We eat what we kill. And, for me, there's nothing else that I can do now at this stage of the game. I did an interview yesterday. It was a Bank of Canada announcement yesterday. And I did an interview on City News. And I re-listened to it this morning. And I'm like, I should have been an economist. So I sent the message off to a couple of my friends. I'm like, if it doesn't ever work out, Benjamin Tull is going to retire here at some point. I don't know if I have enough time to go and do my MBA and my PhD before he retires, but we'll see. If mortgage lending ever doesn't work out, there's always maybe think another option for me
avenue.
Out there.
Yeah, just quietly do it. I've heard it's very easy to achieve those sorts of criteria.
Yeah, especially with working more than a full-time job, I will say. Right. And mortgage lending is really a lifestyle. This is not the 9-to-5 banker's hours. I spoke about it in my book. It's like I was waking up at 10 a.m. and making $100,000 a year. But I was spending probably more than $100,000 a year, and that wasn't cool.
Yeah.
And things kind of shifted for me. I think when I wanted to quit, I'm like, either I'm quitting or I'm going all the way. And that was around the time I'm like, okay, we're going to do this book, and then I'm going to go on this little media tour, and I actually had a sit-down interview on CTV News here, like the news at 6, like which is kind of how the gold standard here in Halifax when the book came out. And they grilled me, and they grilled me hard, and they, asked me about some of my successes and some of my failures that are all in the book. And, it was on the evening news for everyone to see. And, that was really the moment to say, you know what, if I'm doing this, I'm going to be the expert in this area.
Right.
And I'm going to be the go-to guy that when somebody needs an opinion on something, they're going to come to me. And it was really turned into marketing by education. I wasn't asking for the business. I end every interview saying, go seek the advice of an unbiased mortgage professional in your area.
Right.
I never tell people to be like, hey, you should call Clinton.
Yeah.
But guess what?
Well, I think that's what attracts people. Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, like, why do at that point when you're feeling like quitting and your phone kept ringing, what was it that was attracting these people to you? And was it the education, or was it the word of mouth, or was it a little bit of everything?
I think it was a combination. I think early on, in the very early days, most of my business came from my personal network. And then when that dried up, most of my business came from referrals from existing clients. Every single time I funded a mortgage, I thanked the customer for the business. And I would say, if there's anyone else I can help, please send them along. Every single time I did a purchase transaction, if I knew the realtor or I didn't know the realtor, once the mortgage funded, I would send them a message and say, thank you for trusting us to do the mortgage financing. If you know anyone else we can help, please send them along. And I did that consistently every single time. Yeah.
Just polite.
Yeah. You don't get what you want unless you ask.
This is true. And my dad used to say you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And I was a surly teenager, and I'd say, Dad, shut up. But now you see it in the industry, and it's like, I don't understand. It's really evident with you, right? The positivity and the education, and people are leaving you with something of value. And it's not, call me the high pressure sales. It's, do the research yourself, speak to somebody. And then, if the bank is the right choice, the bank is the right choice. I mean, we have multiple lenders because there are multiple different situations, and there are different strengths with different lenders. The banks are great in certain areas. Monolines are great in certain areas. And it's just about educating yourself.
And we don't want every single deal. I have 1 or 2% of the market share here in Halifax.
Right.
That's enough for me. Yeah. I really want to get maybe up to like 1,000 transactions a year and say, you know what, that is a good place. I think we always want more in this industry, and we want to do every single file. No, I want to be the expert at what I do. And that's why I do prime purchases, refinances, and transfers. That's all I do. That's all I do.
Yeah.
But guess what? I have a team of people who work here in my office in Dartmouth and in Halifax. And if I get a file that's alternative lending, I will pass it off to somebody else. If I have a file that's private lending, I'll pass it off to someone else. If I have a file that's a lender that I really don't have the best relationship with, and I know someone else is more of an expert, I pass it off to that person. I want the customer that when they walk in our door here in our offices to get the very best experience, and I want them to get the best experience from anyone that on my team, and I want them to get the same experience they would get with me. But I know when to hold them, and I know when to fold them, and I can't do everything.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think that it takes a very big person to know what they can and can't do. And can you speak to me a little bit about the culture in your office? Because it sounds like it's a very, open, warm environment. I want to hear about it from yourself.
So we have a very interesting setup. We run it as a team. And a lot of the business obviously comes in through me. Some of it comes in, people call us on the telephone. Sometimes, the brokers and associate mortgage brokers, bring it in through their own channel. We have 3 admin people on the front end that we call customer experience advisors. They're the ones who answer the phone. We'll send a client a link to an online application, request the initial documents, get a file open, and schedule appointments. Deal with leads, deal with answering the phone, even doing annual calls, calling for renewal. They do all that kind of front end type of things. And then we have 5 mortgage brokers, including myself, and we see clients, all day, every day. That's our goal. And our job is really getting the file from the time the file is opened to it being approved, from it being approved to getting the commitment signed. We also have a team of fulfillment people who, I think in the industry, sometimes people call them underwriters. They order the commitment, they request the supporting documents, they upload the documents to lenders, deal with the initial pre-audit compliance type things, prepare the documents for signing. And then we have one person who takes care of audit and compliance, and I have a business manager who basically deals with like finance, HR, coaching, operations, things like that. And we also have a fellow on our team who you met, who does like our marketing and technology and stuff like that as a subcontractor. I can't do everything. I have someone who cooks my food and cleans my house. I am good at mortgage lending, and I want to stay super, uber focused on what I do every single day. All these distractions and noise and things that get me outside of my process honestly cost me money. And really, at the end of the day, it kind of impacts the customer because, more time that I have, I'm going to be better used serving someone else.
That's it, right? Like, if this is where your strengths are, you should just be, stay in that lane. Trying to do everything is,
I can't.
That's the recipe for disaster.
I can't. And I have the really, I have to give a shout out to my, fulfillment person. I have the very, very best, world-class fulfillment person. She used to be my BRM with Scotiabank, and she retired from the bank, and a year later, she's like, I can't deal without you in my life. You need me. And I'm like, I don't even have a job for you, but I'm like, I'm going to make one. Come on over. And really a game changer. I've been able she's given me the flexibility to travel the world. I've been able to go to Thailand for 3 weeks, and I know that things are still going to continue along. And I have 100% trust that she is going to do everything accurately, is going to look after the client's best interest, and really knows mortgage lending inside and out. And I think having someone who's on your team that you 100% trust is worth their weight in gold.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's that peace of mind. It's invaluable.
It really is. And this didn't start overnight. There's been so many different iterations and variations of what we're doing right now. And after I won this last award as, Mortgage Broker of the Year for Canada, someone on the Centum Financial Group, head office team, they're like, well, Clinton, what's next? What's next is let's steady the ship and make sure that this is going to be consistent because there is a storm coming.
Let me just enjoy this.
Yeah, let's enjoy this. There's a storm coming,
next.
Though. There's a storm coming in real estate, and there's a storm coming in mortgage lending. And I think the next 12 to 18 months are going to be challenging. And I think even after that, if we start getting into more of a recession area, we're going to have some hard work ahead of us. And I think the last 2 years, the last 2 years, I probably have never worked so hard as I have in my life.
Right. But so hard work, but it's obviously going to be different hard work versus all these files come in. When you say hard work, in your mind, what is that actually looking like?
I think the hard work right now for me is more of the volume is the hard work. We can always do more volume. We'll never turn anybody away unless it's something that's kind of outside of our box. We don't do draw financing. We don't do mortgages typically under $100,000. We don't do, prime commercial deals. We don't do files that have a client that has more than 5 rentals. We have a certain box that we will accept a client or not accept a client.
Right.
We're self-employed. I don't need to do every single file. We're kind of a little bit more picky and choosy on the files that we're going to do. What really pains me is when we're not able to accommodate someone who does fit in our box. That's when I think it's kind of the hard work. It's okay, what can we move? How can we reallocate the resources to, make this happen?
Yeah.
That's what I think kind of hard work is. I think, for me, a little bit of the hard work is dealing with process and technology. I don't even really think I'm in mortgage lending anymore. I think I'm more of a technology person. And, I like coming up with some of the big ideas. But guess what? I see clients all day, every day. That's the easy part. I can do mortgage lending in my sleep.
Yeah, and will you enjoy it? And that's the thing, right? When you enjoy it, it's not work. It becomes something that you want to be doing. Okay, so let's kind of change gears a little bit. When you've got agents looking to join your team, for example, like what is it about your team that attracts these agents to you?
Well, that's a really great question because we actually brought on 2 new agents this year, which is kind of strange for us because I think we might have the reputation to be somewhat challenging to work for because we have very, very high standards. But we actually brought on 2 new agents. One was from a bank lender, so actually came from a branch.
Okay.
And
Right.
the other individual came from another mortgage brokerage. They both had quite a lot of experience, like 10 years for one, I think, and 20 years for the other person.
Right.
What I think attracted them is we do things differently here. Clinton has his
Speak to that.
special sauce. And the special sauce is not just one thing. And I'll tell you what the secret is. We answer the phone. We warm answer every single telephone call that comes in here. We respond to emails. We do things consistently. And we really live and die by our CRM. If it didn't happen in Salesforce, it didn't happen. That's kind of our motto around here. And we do a lot of coaching. I think working on a team is challenging because you're flying Clinton's flag. You have to do it my way, and we have a certain way that we like to do things. And it's not so much that I've recreated the wheel. I haven't. It's more you need to live and work with our culture.
Right, but it sounds like you're very clear on your expectations, which I think makes it easier for people to know what's expected of them. It's very challenging when you go somewhere and you're like, what am I actually meant to be doing? There's no clear parameters. There's no clear expectations. And you're like, am I doing a good job? Am I doing a bad job? So, the fact that you sit down and you have the coaching, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you offer the training and support that these agents need, allows them to decide, am I going to fly the Clinton flag? Because it has to be a decision. They have to want to do it. You can't force somebody to do something.
Well, and I think like the entrepreneurial spirit, everybody wants to kind of fly their own flag.
Right.
And I have an individual here, very successful. She was with another big brokerage here in Halifax, and I would talk to her the year before she came, and she's like, no, I want to fly my own flag. I'm like, okay.
Right.
If anything changes, you know where to find me. And something did change in her life. And she's like, I am ready to fly your flag. I want to have an easier life. I want to have a work-life balance. But guess what?
Yeah.
She 5x'd her volume. And she still has a better life. Because we have the support, we have the people, we have the technology. Yeah. Our split is much lower, but we're very, services rich, and there is a balance between what you make and what you spend and what you get. So I think she really kind of felt that and needed that easier life.
And the fact that, I'll speak to you saying that your splits are lower. I mean, you obviously realize you have a value proposition that you're providing. And so it's interesting when we hear in the industry broker owners saying, I can't keep agents. I mean, I've got them on a 95-5 split.
Never.
And it's like, so speak to that. Tell me a little bit about that, just quickly, obviously, the how you position that, because, on first glance, some people would balk at that.
You know what? Here's the thing. Not about the split. Split has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with what people are getting for that split. Right. You could give people a 50-50 split and they will work for it if, A, they're getting a value for that split.
Exactly.
That is the key. Here in our office, we basically have it as a turnkey business. E&O is paid for. Equifax is paid for. NBC membership is paid for. The computer they use is paid for. Their telephone is paid for. They're given an office. So we're very services rich here. And that has a cost, obviously, to me, but it has a huge value to them. And You know, we have people that answer the phone. I give them deals every single day. So like,
Yeah.
it's a good deal.
Yeah.
It's a good deal.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
you know, I think
exactly.
at 95.5, agent can go anywhere. But I'm guessing at the 95.5, there's not a lot of skin left in the game for that brokerage. They can basically give zero services based on that.
Well, that's it.
You know, and I'm always leery, and I see on I Love Mortgage Brokering, there was a big post around splits and compensation and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm not even going to put a little horse in this race, but sometimes people can't see the forest from the trees.
Well, I think that it's, to your point, you know your value proposition and you can articulate it clearly. When you can't articulate your value proposition, that's when you get stuck in this split game.
Yep.
And
It's a race to the bottom, and someone will always do it cheaper.
Yeah. Well, and you need to be able to say what you're giving, and like, why would somebody choose you? And you've you've got that clearly mapped out, which is, part of your success. You know what you're coming to the table.
And I'll be honest with you, there's not a lot of money in the brokerage business. I think there's a lot of brokers that really do it well, and there's some that don't do it well. But I think the money's really in being an agent and being a really, really good agent and getting a fair split and also getting a good amount of services for the amount that your split is. I think being a broker and owning a franchise is a tough gig. It's hard to keep everyone happy. And, within our franchise model, our franchise is actually owned in Moncton, and we have a different operation there. And they're on a similar split where they're getting a little bit of a higher split, but less services for that split. So different models work for different people. I think the reason that our kind of situation works well is we really provide that lifestyle, and it's work-life balance and having someone to help out and give a helping hand. Like, I'm the first one to jump on and like help with a file, and that really has a value. Like, they can walk down the office here, like we're in the same building. They can just walk down the hall and be like, so what do you think about this? Not a lot of mortgage brokers have that. We really believe in the brick and mortar. I'm actually sitting in an old bank branch here in downtown Dartmouth. This used to be National Bank. And over in our office in downtown Halifax, our office that we built there was in the old Bank of Montreal main branch. So we believe these banks might know something or two about real estate and knowing where to get the best locations. I'm like, we need to go where there's a Starbucks and where there used to be a bank.
Well, and they have that good lending energy already, right? They've had all those approvals through the door, so that energy just stays in that building.
And you know what? I love the energy so much. I was at a thrift shop in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, which is an old fishing community, and they had these pictures from a Bank of Montreal like general meeting from like the 1940s or 50s or something. I'm like, I need this for my wall. We don't deal with Bank of Montreal, but we're sitting in an old Bank of Montreal branch, so I'm like, this is some good like vintage art.
Oh, I'm sure your clients would love it too, because you can even like tell the story.
It was a sea of white men wearing tuxes. So I think maybe the photo will look different today than it did, 50,
Hopefully.
60, 70 years ago.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm just going to check and make sure that I've gone through all my questions that I had for you pertaining to... Okay, so what are some of the proudest... First of all, before I go into that, time check. Are you okay for time?
I am doing good for time.
Perfect. Okay. So this will be the last one that's specific to you. So what are some of your proudest accomplishments in both your personal and your work life?
You know what? I think personal life, I've had a lot of failures. I've had some successes. I think the personal life has maybe not been my greatest success in my life. I think sometimes I wish I would have done things better or differently. I think I probably put too much of a focus on that work. And I'm working on it. I think that is kind of a moving target, as, many relationships have been. I'm sure many of our viewers can say, 2020 and 2021 was probably not their best year. in terms of relationship and work-life balance, and being cooped up with your spouse or whatever your situation may be, or lack thereof. Significant other or lack thereof. So I think that's still a moving target. I'm certainly working on it. I work on it like every single day, but I'm certainly not perfect. I don't know if anybody out there that really, really is. And I think in this industry, sometimes we forget about that. We forget about the work-life balance. We forget maybe about the personal relationships, because there's such a high focus on, the finance industry. Work-wise, I certainly have had a lot of successes. Being named Mortgage Broker of the Year 4 times in Canada, I think, is really very special. I think being in the top of my game here in Halifax, but also kind of across Atlantic Canada, has it's opened a lot of doors. And I think that maybe I have an easier life than a lot of other mortgage brokers, but it didn't come with a lot of hard work. And I also do the hard work every single day.
So my understanding is that you've been with Centum since you first started mortgage brokering. Is that essentially correct?
No, I think I started around 2009. So I think I'm going on like 13, 14 years right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what made you choose to partner with Centum all those years ago, 13 years ago?
Well, you know what? At that point, I wanted to leave the industry. I don't know why I keep on wanting to leave, but I had been involved in another franchise with Dominion Lending Centers, and that didn't work out.
Okay.
And honestly, they called me, and I knew a couple of the people that worked for this franchise, and they thought, Clinton, you know what? This would be a great fit. Why don't you try for a while and see if that's, it's going to work for you? And I'm like, okay, I did it. And then, 13 years later, here I am, and I think they really supported me over the years, because, it was the best of times, but it was also probably the worst of times at moments as well. So it was kind of the family aspect. And Centum's gone through a lot of changes for being a small super broker, like over the years. And things weren't as great when Chris wasn't at the helm. I think there was a lot of years where, they were kind of coasting, a lot of like over-promising and under-delivering. But it's like that in every corporation. But things really changed when Chris came on board, and it needed a cultural change. With a lot of these franchise businesses, and even in mortgage finance alone, it was kind of like the old boys club. And I think he broke down some of those barriers, which was nice.
And so is that the reason you continue to choose to stay with the Centum family? Because of Chris's innovations, or maybe you can tell us. Tell me.
I think part of the reason that I want to stay is I'm excited to see what the future brings now. I think that we are only kind of getting our feet wet. And I think that we're a little bit one of those like silent but deadly types. I think everyone loves to root for the underdog. And I think now more than ever, that's certainly the case.
Yeah. And I mean, I've noticed that you use the word underdog a lot. Is that how you feel? Or is that how you have felt?
I think I felt like that before. I think I certainly have felt like the underdog. And I think that I'm always now kind of competing against myself, as wild as that sounds. Yeah. I mean, who else am I going to compete against now at this point?
Exactly. And has Centum helped you in any capacity to kind of shake that feeling of the underdog off, or like?
Yeah, they've given me they've certainly given me a lot of opportunities to be heard kind of on the national level, which I think is really, really cool. Right. From Halifax, you wouldn't normally think that you would get the opportunity to, lead webinars and, be on the national stage and things like that, which I think is really cool. Normally it's only, the biggest, or like the Toronto and the BC that kind of get those opportunities. But they certainly have given a lot of opportunities and continue to, which I think is really kind of empowering, but also motivating. Like I want to do better. Yeah. And now I want to compete. Like I want to be number one in volume again. Yeah. And that is certainly motivates me every day.
And so you mentioned earlier on family, And we use that word a lot, family. Like we see the Centum network, really it's a family. And we look out for everybody as family. What does family mean to you?
I think family is really there to kind of support you, whether it's the good times or the bad times. And it's very easy to celebrate successes when things are good.
Right.
But I think that when things are maybe not so hot, we really need to lean in sometimes on the family to, maybe motivate you or build you up or give you some support. And, I feel like I'm a call or a text message or an email or an Instagram message away from, having someone there that is really on my team and wants to see me be successful. I think in a lot of these super brokers, it's just so big. And I think there's a lot of very sales focused onboarding. And I've heard from other mortgage brokers that it's sell, sell, sell. They get onboarded and then they're like, oh, we never hear from anybody ever again. It's kind of the opposite, I think, with Centum. It's like all the support is when you're there and when you're producing and when you want to be involved. That's where the support is. And I really think that's where the rubber hits the road. Like, I don't want to be sold to. I don't even think that I'm in sales. I know sometimes people think that mortgage lending is like salesy, but I think we're in the service business and the advice business, really.
Yes. 100%. Well, to your point, we should be in the service and the advice business. To be giving our clients the correct mortgages, we need to be listening to them. We need to be understanding what their unique problems and needs are, because to sell, it kind of implies that you're not listening or you're trying to ram something down, fitting that round peg in the square hole. But we're very much, it's the service. Like, what do you need? How can I help you? And that's very much like, the service and the education and the support. That's really what we need to be providing our clients.
I agree. And I think it's the same, as an individual mortgage agent, as a franchisee, anyone who works on any of our teams. That's really kind of our words to live by.
Yes, 100%. And you did mention, you alluded to Centums in, a decade ago, we didn't have the best name. And so, then Chris has come on board, done some massive changes. And like, how important to you is the honesty, the integrity, and the caring that you see now in the new Centum?
Honestly, I don't think I would be here if it wasn't for Chris. I think I'd probably still be in the industry, let's be honest. But I don't know if I would be with Centum. I can tell you, I've had a call from every super broker, and they will continue to call. Everybody, wants a little taste, and I think they're looking for the crack to be like, okay, is there an opportunity?
Yeah.
I think they know now there's probably no cracks, but they can, you can still call. I'm not going to call you back, but I have sometimes a good little chuckle at it to be like, you think there's actually an opportunity? Interesting. Like what, made that happen? And I think in this industry, sometimes there's too much mobility. Like, you see it. It's the same thing with realtors. There's some that just move around from kind of network to network to network. And it's kind of a red flag. For me, being in the same brokerage, being in the same office for the last 13 years, people know where to find me. Yeah. And I think that has a lot of value. But I also would not hesitate making a move if things were not good. I believe people need a fresh start. And I really do believe that there's a lot of really great things going on in Centum that we're not on the soapbox telling everyone. And you don't really know until you're here.
Yes, and that's, something that we are trying to work on, because we do have a lot to offer, but we don't want to be this, we don't want exponential growth. We want to make sure that we're bringing on the right people who have the same values, because we want to keep that family feeling, because one of the things that I love, I've only been here a short time, but what I love is that you're allowed to be your authentic self. And Chris isn't afraid to have like honest conversations with you and say, pull you aside and be like, you know what, what you did wasn't the best, or you know what you did was fantastic. And that really goes back to that family where we're here to support you in the good times, but we're also here to support you in the, when things aren't going great.
It's not just the lip service, because I think in this industry there's a lot of lip service, and I think there's a lot of kind of disingenuous actions and attitudes, and it's 2022. It's really, I think being real and being human has a lot more value than just rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah. And I've noticed you're exceptionally reflective. Is that something that you've always been, or is this something that you've learned through, and is this something that you find that Centum supports, is self-reflection?
You know what? I think it might be a little bit of me being out of the office for the last 10 days. I've had a time to like clear my mind and not think about mortgage lending as much. I'm not saying that I didn't work while I was away. Let me tell you, I was really busy. But
I won't tell the boss if you didn't.
We'll wait for those funding reports to come out and see how I did. You know what? I think it's spring, and now we're almost into summer. When we're doing this recording, like we're a couple weeks away from being in summer here. And I love the kind of the changing of the seasons. I love the first of the month, and I love the first of the week, because I always think I'm like, okay, I can do it better, or I have a fresh start. And I think anytime that a milestone like that happens, a Monday, sometimes, you hear about the manic Mondays and people hate Mondays and Mondays are terrible. Mondays are the opportunity. Just like the first of the month is the opportunity, the first of the quarter is the opportunity, and a new season is the opportunity. And I think, the opportunity really is here for us at Centum to be had. And, there's certainly a lot of opportunity for everyone in this network and for mortgage brokers across the country.
Totally. And I really appreciate your positive attitude, because I find that there's a little bit of the sky falling in happening or falling down. I'm not sure the exact phrasing, but it really, I am a big believer in, it's all about the framing. If you frame it positively, you'll have that positive outcome. Can you speak to that at all?
I 100% agree with you. Currently, we're in a raising rate environment, which can be very challenging in this industry specifically. And just to give a little bit of the final word, over 17 years, I've seen rates go up and I've seen rates go down. But guess what? People still need a mortgage.
Yes, I've been saying this for years. Yeah. We're all like, my parents bought their house and I think their interest rate was 20%, but they bought a house.
Transactions will still happen no matter where the rates are.
Yes.
If anything, I think there's even more opportunity right now than there is when the rates are going down, because people need that expert advice. And you know what? Friends don't let friends take a fixed rate.
Well, and they need the expert advice, and they also need that calm, right? You need to be the calm. They're going to be
wound up.
All these emotions going on when they're buying a house, when they're scared they're going to be outbid. You're that person that's just going to bring them down and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Let's get you on the level. And they're going to, that's what they need, especially in this environment where, the media doesn't help, where, rates are going up. Oh my God, I got to get into it.
And the media is really on it, because I've never heard so much about mortgage lending in the last, 24 months, that I have in the last 24 years of my life. And it's certainly a very hot topic. People are becoming more educated, but the attitude in the media is that the rates are going to the moon, which they are not. And we're really here as mortgage professionals to give that advice piece and really coach and educate our consumers and our business partners. Thank you so much for having me. I love having the final word, and I can't wait for us to do this again.
I want to thank Clinton Wilkins for his time today. I really hope that everybody has enjoyed listening to the conversation I've had with him as much as I enjoyed having it with Clinton. And please stay tuned for more interviews and more chats with Zoe from Centum. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.